Well, this week the ABC is looking at the impact of climate change in Australia, with many concerned about the long-term effect on agriculture and food production. Among those is Simon Bradshaw, Oxfam Australia's Climate Change Advocacy Coordinator. Good morning. Thanks so much for your time. You've written a piece that says, well, with extreme weather comes a rise in food prices.
Yes, good morning, Karina. That's right. Scientists are very clear that in driving up temperatures, we're increasing the frequency and intensity of extreme weather, and that, of course, creates greater hazards for food production. We do see declines in yields with rising temperatures and shifting rainfall patterns, but perhaps the biggest hazard is these new weather extremes. We know that if you have a particular severe tropical storm or heat wave or flood, that can cause immense crop damage and in some cases wipe out harvests in a stroke. Climate change impacts us all. Australians are familiar with the impact on food prices that we can have from extreme weather. But as an international aid and development agency, of course, we're concerned particularly about the impacts on poor communities in developing countries where there often aren't the resources and resilience to deal with these sudden price hikes and their impacts.
Let's just stick with Australia for the moment. And prices have come down here after the peak in banana prices and fresh produce prices that we saw at the time of the Queensland floods. Is this about the cheapest it'll be?
Look, it's difficult to predict. The one thing we know is that with more erratic weather, we have more volatile food markets. We will see prices go up and then we'll see them come down periodically. Following the damage to fruit harvests a few years ago, we have seen the price of some fruit in particular come down. But I think we shouldn't get false optimism out of these short-term trends, because the longer-term trend of increasing pressure on resources and particularly key commodities, if you have a significant extreme weather event in a major food-producing region, does all point to a future of greater volatility and greater prices.
And what's the experience been in the Pacific, given that we know that a lot of those islands are very low-lying and are very much concerned about climate change?
Look, the Pacific, and that's of course our nearest neighbours we're talking about, I think it's well known, acutely vulnerable for a number of reasons. Rising sea levels, most obviously, which just create problems for water security as well as food security, and in the most unfortunate cases, the actual loss of habitable land. Countries that are dependent on food imports, including places in the Pacific, again, there's the local challenges, but you're also at the mercy of increasingly volatile markets. And even the US drought last year, for example, where they lost a quarter of their corn harvest, that affects food prices worldwide, including in African countries, including in the Pacific. So in addition to these local challenges, you have the multiplying effects of then having to deal with higher food prices. And, you know, if 3/4 of your income is spent on food, as is often the case in poor communities in developing countries, then extreme weather events and the shocks that creates within food markets can lead to being unable to feed your family. So it's a very serious concern.
So how can communities adapt to meet this growing challenge?
Well, there's two very important things we need to do from Australia. Firstly, of course, we need to redouble our efforts to bring down emissions and to work towards a truly effective global climate deal. But there is a role for us in working closely in partnership with developing world communities and building more resilient food systems. That particularly involves supporting small-scale producers. That involves innovation in agricultural techniques. It means financial support, and it means helping develop the capacity to manage ongoing change. So not just a particular shock created by next year's events, but the ability to be more resilient in a world that we know is going to change.
Just before you came on air, we heard from the IPCC Chair, Dr. Rajendra Pachauri, and he's saying that the extreme weather events in Australia recently are part of an unmistakable trend. Does Oxfam agree with those sentiments?
Absolutely. Look, we changed the climate and we changed the environment in which all weather forms. It's quite clear from the Bureau of Meteorology, from the Climate Commission, that the heat wave of late December, early January was unprecedented in its geographical extent, in its duration and in its intensity. And that is, of course, in part because it's happening in a world that is now 1 degree warmer. And in effect, we're turbocharging the climate system. We're creating a future of more extremes and all the hazards that that brings. And that's no more obvious than its impact on food production and the way that impacts all of us, particularly developing world communities. And the imperative is very clearly there to begin stronger efforts to bring down emissions and meet this challenge.
Simon Bradshaw, thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you.